Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. In ancient times, Earth was the stage for an extraordinary presence, giants of imposing stature known in the Holy Scriptures as the Nephilim, beings who stood between 10 to 16 feet tall and, in some accounts, even taller. These colossal figures dominated vast regions, leaving behind a trail of mystery and fear wherever they went. But what do we really know about them? Who were these giants? Where did they come from? And what was the true reason behind their sudden disappearance from history? In a world where powerful forces intertwine with ancient legends, these titanic beings raise more questions than answers. Were they evil creatures or mere mortals with superhuman abilities? And what explains the vanishing of these beings who once ruled the earth? In this video, we will try to uncover these mysteries by exploring biblical accounts and the many terms used to describe these giants, among them the most well-known, the Rephaim and the Emim. The origin of the Nephilim, as described in the Bible, remains a deep mystery that continues to fascinate scholars and curious minds alike. And it is this enigma that we will attempt to decipher together. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable journey through the Scriptures and the echoes of the past, as we seek to unveil the true story of the Nephilim giants. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it. Let's invite others to join us in this quest for truth. The enigmatic origin of the Nephilim giants is about to be revealed. Today, a series of heated debates surrounds the origin and meaning of the giants mentioned in the pages of the Old Testament. These colossal figures, found in various biblical passages, have intrigued scholars, theologians, and even the general public for centuries. What makes this topic even more fascinating is the variety of races and castes of giants mentioned in the Bible, each with its own unique characteristics, yet all connected to an ancient enigma that defies conventional explanations. The most notable giants are known by names that may sound mysterious at first: Rephaim, Anakim, Zuzim, Emim, and Zamzumim. These names, echoing from a lost era, are often mentioned briefly, but carry significant symbolic weight, fueling the curiosity of Bible readers and scholars alike. The first time the name Rephaim appears in the Bible is in a very specific and dramatic context. In Genesis 14:5, during the famous battle between several alliances of kings, it is said that Abraham, still called Abram at the time, embarked on a rescue mission for his nephew Lot. This episode, recorded in surprising detail, sheds light on the military and social universe of the time and offers a glimpse into the tribes that inhabited those lands, including the Rephaim. The verse says, "In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shaveh-Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness." This passage is often overlooked in more superficial studies, but it provides valuable information about the presence of peoples with striking physical characteristics. The battle itself, though it may seem secondary, reveals the diversity of groups that coexisted at the time, many of whom were feared and respected for their towering stature. However, it is in Deuteronomy 2:10-11 that the mention of the Rephaim gains more depth and complexity. This passage recounts the history of a people who lived in the land of Moab before the Moabites arrived, known as the Emim. Although the Emim are acknowledged by the Moabites, it's important to note that the Bible directly links them to the Rephaim, drawing a connection between the various tribes of giants who passed through the region. The verse states, "The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also considered Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim." Here, an intriguing connection is established. The Emim, already known for their immense stature and strength, are described in an almost poetic manner, as a race of giants who, though extinct or displaced, left a significant mark on the history of the region. The fact that they are referred to as Rephaim suggests the existence of a lineage of giants, an ancestral legacy that transcends time and cultures. When the Moabites settled in the land, They may have inherited not only the knowledge, but perhaps even the fear of this ancient race. While the Rephaim are often associated with a people of great height and power, it is the Anakim who stand out in the biblical narratives. The first dramatic mention of the Anakim appears in Numbers 13:33, when the spies sent by Moses to scout the land of Canaan return with terrifying reports about the tribes living there. The text offers us a fascinating glimpse into how the inhabitants of that land were perceived by the Israelites, a perception that would go on to inspire either courage or fear in those preparing to conquer Canaan. The verse tells us, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." These words echo with a profound sense of powerlessness in the face of a monstrous threat. The Nephilim, mentioned here as the sons of Anak, are described as towering beings, possibly of superhuman size, whose mere presence made the spies feel small and insignificant, like grasshoppers before giants. The mention of the Nephilim is particularly intriguing, as it brings to light a mysterious and little-explained lineage of beings who seem to occupy a prominent place in biblical history, but whose meaning remains nebulous. The use of the word grasshoppers reveals not just the spies' fear, but also a crucial insight into the nature of the biblical giants. They were not only physically massive, but also posed a monumental challenge, both physically and psychologically, for those who dared to face them. The fear and sense of helplessness were palpable. Through these passages, the Bible presents us with a vision of an ancient world where imposing, almost mythological figures once walked the earth. The Zuzim are a mysterious tribe briefly mentioned in the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament, in a context that takes us back to the history of the Promised Land, long before the arrival of the Israelites. While many tribes and peoples are prominently featured in biblical narratives, such as the Anakim, Nephilim, and Rephaim, the Zuzim are referenced almost obscurely, with very few details regarding their origin or role in history. The only reference to the Zuzim is found in Genesis chapter 14, within what has become known as the War of the Kings. This portion of the Bible describes a major coalition of kings, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, who joined forces to confront other rulers in the region in an epic battle that would have significant consequences for various cities and peoples. It is in this context that the Zuzim are mentioned, though almost incidentally, with no further detail provided about their history or characteristics. The verse that mentions the Zuzim in Genesis 14 presents us with a scene of major military conflicts and political alliances. The passage describes how the king of Sodom came out to meet the other kings after a series of victories in the war. However, the narrative offers no further details about the Zuzim or their direct involvement in the conflict. All we know is that they were one of the many tribes inhabiting the region prior to the arrival of the Israelites, and their mention is associated with an area known as the Valley of Shaveh, or the King's Valley. The fact that the Bible offers no more substantial information about the Zuzim makes their presence all the more enigmatic. We do not know whether they were a tribe of giants, like the Anakim or the Rephaim, or whether they possessed any unique traits that set them apart from other tribes of the time. Their inclusion in the War of the Kings seems to be more of a passing reference, one that stirs curiosity about the peoples who lived in the land before the rise of the great nations and kingdoms that followed. The absence of details about the Zuzim is even more intriguing when compared to the amount of information available about other peoples and tribes in the Bible. While the Anakim, for example, are described as giants with a strong presence in biblical narratives, and the Nephilim are tied to legends and interpretations involving the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, the Zuzim receive no such attention. Their mention is brief, leaving many questions unanswered. Were the Zuzim in some way related to these other mysterious groups? Or were they simply a small forgotten tribe lost to history? The lack of historical or archaeological records about this people only deepens the aura of mystery surrounding them. Although the Bible references many tribes and groups that inhabited the land of Canaan, the Zuzim remain nearly invisible. Their inclusion in a context of grand battles and alliances, but with no further insight into their identity or impact, places them as an enigmatic piece of an incomplete biblical puzzle. Were the Zuzim a short-lived tribe whose traces vanished with time, or is there something more to their story that remains hidden, waiting to be uncovered? To this day, that question lingers in the minds of those who seek to understand the mysteries of the Bible and the ancient civilizations it describes. The origin of the giants mentioned in the Bible has long sparked intense debate among scholars, historians, and theologians. The controversy is especially strong when it comes to the nature of the Nephilim, the ancient giants who once roamed the earth in the earliest times. Over the centuries, numerous interpretations have emerged, some modern, others ancient, based on Hebrew and Aramaic texts that offer deeper insights into these extraordinary beings. These interpretations date back to antiquity, to the time of Jesus, and even earlier, when Jewish thought began exploring the nature and origins of the Nephilim. To better understand the origin of the giants, we must turn to the oldest interpretations, which often provide unique and revealing perspectives. Ancient Jewish thought contributed crucial insights into these beings, who, in biblical tradition, were considered colossal entities with strength and abilities that set them far above ordinary humans. Although the most famous giant in the Bible is Goliath, the figure who faced young David in an epic battle, it's worth noting that the Bible refers to other giants even greater and more powerful. These colossal beings were not only known in the land of Canaan, but also in Mesopotamia, where myths and legends of giants circulated among various cultures of the time. The Bible, therefore, is not the only source that speaks of such figures. Various mythologies across the world, from the indigenous traditions of the Americas to Greek mythology and even Norse legends, also make reference to giant beings. These giants vary in form and abilities, but one constant remains. They are often portrayed as figures of immense power, with extraordinary physical strength. In many cultures, their heroic or terrifying feats helped shape origin stories and founding myths. This phenomenon shows that the idea of giants transcends cultural and religious boundaries. It is not limited to biblical tradition, but is a common feature in many ancient civilizations. Understanding the origin of the Nephilim requires careful analysis of one of the Bible's most important passages, found in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. This verse describes a supernatural event that for many explains the birth of giants. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from all whom they chose. Genesis 6:2. This passage is crucial, as it gives us the first hint that something extraordinary was taking place on earth. A union between the sons of God, commonly interpreted as angels, and human women who attracted the attention of celestial beings. What follows in verse 3 reveals a divine response to this union. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days shall be 120 years." This verse suggests a shift in the divine-human relationship. By engaging with celestial beings, humanity appeared to have provoked divine disapproval. But it is in the very next verse that we find a key to understanding the giants. There were Nephilim on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. Here, the term Nephilim appears for the first time. Its direct Hebrew translation is often rendered as those who fell or fallen ones. This etymology suggests that the Nephilim were indeed the offspring of an unusual union between celestial beings, often interpreted as fallen angels, and human women. According to some interpretations, this union resulted in beings with giant-like traits. However, it's important to note that the Bible never explicitly links the Nephilim with giants in a direct and unambiguous way. The word Nephilim refers specifically to the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Only afterward does the association with giants emerge, as if these descendants, the Nephilim, were the giants referenced in later biblical narratives. This interpretation of the Nephilim as offspring of fallen angels and human women became central in many biblical traditions and legends, yet the exact nature of this union remains mysterious. Many scholars believe that this Genesis passage represents an ancient attempt to explain the existence of extraordinary and otherworldly beings, such as giants. The idea that these giants were not merely human, but rather a fusion of divine and mortal elements, is fascinating. It suggests that the Earth had once witnessed a form of hybrid being that defied normal human understanding. Therefore, the Nephilim were not merely a race of giants, they were the consequence of a cosmic transgression, a union that blended the celestial and the terrestrial so profoundly that it gave rise to beings of exceptional and unique power. This ancient view helps explain why, in antiquity, giants were not seen merely as mythical figures, but as manifestations of a reality that extended beyond the earthly realm. In addition to the Nephilim, believed to be the giants born from the union of fallen angels and human women, antiquity also recorded the existence of other monstrous and enigmatic beings. Often described in grotesque terms, these creatures were not merely the products of an overactive imagination, but were expressions of a cosmic rebellion. They were beings from heavenly realms who at some point defied divine order. The fallen angels, often identified with demons in Christian tradition, did not seek union with the daughters of men merely out of carnal desire or personal pleasure. The purpose of this act, far deeper and symbolically darker, was directly tied to their desire to offend God and corrupt His original creation. By taking on human forms to mingle with women, these angels not only defied divine order, but also distorted God's design for humanity, creating a lineage that was beyond human comprehension. In many religious traditions and ancient texts, it is stated that angels have the ability to manifest physically on earth by assuming human form. This power to move between the celestial and the earthly realms allowed them to act directly among human beings, taking for themselves the most attractive women they found. The act of crossing these sacred boundaries, the union between celestial beings and human women, was not a mere whim, but a deliberate act of rebellion, a challenge to the Creator himself. The Nephilim, therefore, are the direct result of this unnatural union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. These giants, whose imposing figures and superhuman strength made them nearly mythological, are described as powerful beings with a corrupted and distorted origin. Their birth marked the beginning of a bloodline that defied the very essence of humanity. Interestingly, the Book of Jude in the New Testament reinforces this idea by stating that the angels who did not keep their proper domain and abandoned their heavenly dwelling are now imprisoned in darkness, awaiting God's great judgment at the end of time. In Jude 1:6, it is reported that these rebellious angels engaged in acts of sexual immorality, similar to the sins committed in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were also destroyed due to their depravity. The next verse, Jude 1:7, highlights that the sin of these angels, through illicit acts, resulted in divine punishment, an eternal fire that not only consumed those cities, but served as an example of the consequences of such sins. The sin of the fallen angels, then, was their involvement in sexual perversion, which gave rise to a monstrous offspring. Not only the giants known as Nephilim, but also other deformed and distorted creatures. These colossal beings represented a true corruption of humanity. Often described as grotesque and unrecognizable, these beings existed as abominations, transgressions against the divine order. An important source that sheds light on these events is the Book of Enoch, an ancient text preserved in Ethiopian and Aramaic copies and part of the tradition of the Essene Jewish community. The Book of Enoch offers a detailed account of the fall of the angels, their union with human women, and the birth of the giants, a story that directly echoes the Genesis account. For scholars and believers alike, the Book of Enoch is one of the most important sources that supports the idea that the giants were, in fact, descendants of fallen angels. In addition to the Book of Enoch, there are other significant texts within ancient Jewish traditions, including the Book of Giants, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. This book, dated to about 700 years before Christ, shares the same perspective as earlier texts and presents a rich narrative on the origin of giants. Interestingly, the Book of Giants frequently references the Book of Enoch, reinforcing the idea that these colossal beings were the offspring of angels who had transgressed the divine order. This synergy between the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, and other texts from ancient Jewish tradition offers a clear perspective on the dark origin of the giants. These texts not only share a common view of the origins of the Nephilim and other monstrous beings, but also illuminate a broader concept, that in antiquity, the line between the divine and the human was not as rigid as we might assume, and that transgressing divine laws had catastrophic consequences, consequences that shaped the destiny of many cultures and traditions throughout history. Thus, the ancient giants, like the Nephilim, are not merely mythological or legendary figures. They are part of a much larger narrative involving celestial rebellion, the corruption of divine creation, and the emergence of a monstrous lineage that defied God's very purpose. The story of these beings, far from being a simple allegory, provides a window into the deep tensions between heaven and earth, between the divine and the human, a tension that still resonates in the myths and legends that shape our understanding of the ancient world. A remarkable insight into the origin and fate of the giants mentioned in the Bible and Jewish traditions is offered by the unique perspective of the Book of Jubilees, an ancient text rooted in the deepest traditions of Judaism. Also known as Little Genesis, this book contains fascinating revelations about the Nephilim and their spiritual consequences. One of the most intriguing ideas found in the Book of Jubilees is how it describes the divine punishment imposed on the giants, beings born from the monstrous union between human women and fallen angels. According to this work, when these giants transgressed divine laws by uniting with women, not only were their physical bodies corrupted, but their souls and spirits as well. The Book of Jubilees recounts that, as part of their divine punishment, these giants were transformed into unclean spirits, a distinct class of impure spiritual beings that began to wander the earth. This punishment reflects the belief that such a cosmic transgression, an act that defied the divine order, could not be undone in any simple or conventional way. The spiritual concept that emerges from this transformation is disturbing. When the giants died, their souls could find no rest, not in paradise nor in hell. They were not traditionally condemned to the underworld, but became wandering spirits, with no specific place in the spiritual realm. In the tradition of the Book of Jubilees, these dead giants were described as lesser demons or simply unclean spirits. This view implies that after death, they received neither heavenly redemption nor eternal punishment, but were condemned to roam aimlessly, spreading evil and corruption wherever they went. These spirits, often described as restless souls, are widely identified with the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible. The notion that the Nephilim were, by nature, beings without a clear afterlife destiny reinforces the idea that their existence was an aberration not only on earth, but also in the spiritual realm. They were trapped between worlds, creatures who, by defying divine law, paid the price with an existence devoid of purpose, condemned to become agents of chaos, symbolizing the distortion of everything God had created as good. It is important to note that the Book of Jubilees holds a unique position within religious traditions. While in most of Christianity, it is considered apocryphal, meaning outside the official biblical canon. It occupies a distinct place within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In the Ethiopian version of the Bible, the Book of Jubilees is considered canonical and is read and respected by many within the Ethiopian Church. This inclusion is significant, as the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition is rich and unique, preserving many writings and texts not found in other Christian Bibles. The inclusion of the Book of Jubilees in the Ethiopian canon offers a unique window into how certain ancient Jewish traditions viewed not only the giants, but also the spiritual forces that arose from their transgressive actions. For scholars and believers within that tradition, the book offers a more detailed account of what happened after the fall of the angels, the emergence of the Nephilim, and the spiritual consequences of that unnatural union. The figure of the Nephilim, as beings of power and celestial origin, yet corrupted by their transgression, re-emerges vividly in this text, reflecting the profound impact such beings had on the religious cosmology of early Jewish communities. Thus, the Book of Jubilees not only contributes to our understanding of the origin of the giants and the Nephilim, but also illuminates an important aspect of Jewish spiritual tradition. It portrays the struggle between good and evil not merely as a battle of visible forces, but also of spiritual entities who, because of their corrupted nature, are doomed to wander in darkness, unable to atone for their sins. In the end, the Book of Jubilees adds yet another fascinating layer to the understanding of the Nephilim and their fate, placing these monstrous beings in an intermediate space between heaven and earth, good and evil, with their souls condemned to wander in a state that reflects their original rebellion. The fact that this view is preserved in the tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and in other ancient Jewish texts shows just how enduring these stories are, continuing to inspire deep reflection on spirituality, morality, and the destiny of humanity in its interaction with the divine. The relationship between the giants and the Great Flood is surrounded by two main interpretations. The first proposes that even after the flood, the fallen angels once again engaged with human women, giving rise to a new generation of giants. This would have been the last lineage of these colossal beings. Yet, even in the face of divine judgment, the rebellious angels did not repent and were ultimately imprisoned by God in eternal chains, as described in the Epistle of Jude, verses 6 and 7. The second interpretation suggests that some giants managed to escape the destruction of the flood. According to this view, they sought refuge on high mountains that turned into islands during the Great Inundation, using improvised vessels made from massive pre-flood tree trunks, such as cedars up to 25 meters tall, 82 feet, among other ancient species. In this way, they floated on the waters and survived for a time. Some scholars even believe that these giants were capable of building actual boats, and that their survival after the flood served to remind the new humanity that no power, no matter how great, stands above the Creator. Interestingly, this perspective is supported by several ancient rabbis who claimed that a portion of the giants survived the flood. However, this lineage gradually faded away, even though its members lived for long periods, well beyond the human average. This video is part of a special series about the giants in the scriptures. If you're enjoying this content and want to see more episodes like this one, support the channel by leaving a like and sharing it with your friends. That helps us reach more people interested in exploring the mysteries of the Bible and its forgotten narratives. Check out other episodes from this series at the end of the video. Thank you so much for staying with us this far. See you soon.